Welcome to a very special Privasec edition of our broadcast episode. In this session, we have the CEO of VeriSaaS, Brice Neilson. He was also a former police officer who has held various roles in major crime and homicide investigations in Australia. We also have the co-founder and CISO at Privasec, Prashant Hadankar himself, who's joining us as we celebrate VeriSaaS' successful completion of their IRAP assessment. Prashant's a name well known in the IRAP industry, having personally brought many big names through this process. Join us in this conversation as we cover VeriSaaS' journey in IRAP and their experience.
VeriSaaS was established in 2019 as an independent software vendor supplying mission-critical services for government. Essentially what VeriSaaS is, we're trying to take the burden away from government agencies in having to develop and manage their own applications and their own cybersecurity posture in-house. As you can appreciate, a large number of government organisations, and specifically law enforcement and emergency services, they've got an extremely critical job to do. So if we take law enforcement, for example, we wanted to see more police officers out on the street, more police officers out in the community, and spending more of their time actually engaging with the community and doing their core functions. In the past, government agencies and specifically law enforcement have had to, have had the burden of, maintaining their own cybersecurity, information security posture, where with, very few vendors actually supporting them with managed services or, what's referred to in the private sector as, software as a service offerings. Which is a very common, delivery model to the private sector that hasn't been afforded to government agencies for quite some time. So VeriSaaS's goal was essentially to provide an end-to-end managed service when it comes to, unique product offerings, such as VeriNote, which is one of our services, to handle, highly sensitive, highly protected, mission-critical information. But whilst giving a level of assurance to the customer that we're handling that information and that we're collecting and retaining that information in the safest and most secure way possible. So our product offering itself and, our application development is a very small part of what we do. Whereas the residual, I'd say 95% of what we do is taking that burden away from our customer or end users and ensuring that the managed service that we're providing is highly secure, highly available, highly efficient. And part of that responsibility on us is we want to give the customers a level of assurance that we have been independently assessed, that we are meeting what we expect of ourselves. So VeriSaaS expect of ourselves that we meet the highest standards of information security, be it through our policies, our use of technology, the way we store, retrieve, encrypt, develop our policies and our posture and our security sort of environment. Is fundamentally on us to maintain. However, we wanted a level of assurance for ourselves that we're doing the right thing and that we're meeting Australian government information security manual standards, but also the general expectations and the general principles around cybersecurity. So to truly give that sort of holistic approach to giving a managed service, we couldn't simply just develop applications and say, here you go, law enforcement, use that, put your protected data on it. We needed to look at a more holistic approach and go, okay, yeah, we can develop this really cool application that's going to assist the frontline police, for example, or our firefighters or our intelligence agencies. Again, like I said, that was 5% of it. But it's how we deliver that service to the end users or to the government agency that was significantly important. And historically, those government agencies needed to conduct those assessments themselves, or it'd be deployed on premises and they needed to maintain that on-premises solution. They had to come up with their own policies, their own security posture. And obviously with all of those burdens and with that sort of that model that they've always had to operate with, that's taking them away from doing their core job. And when we take police, for example, or I focus on police a lot because they've obviously got a really critical job. When we take police off the streets or when we take police away from their core function of protecting the community, not only do they not achieve their desired outcomes, but the community suffer. So VeriSaaS's mission is to support those who are protecting us. And for us to be able to support those who protect us, we need to obviously take a really holistic view and go to, I suppose, to extraordinary lengths to ensure that not only our applications are functionally effective, they work, they're easy to use, but that the workload, our internal posture, our policies, our governance is in line with what is expected of the government. And fundamental part of going down the IRAP journey was to ensure two things: that we are doing the right thing. So there was two outcomes that we wanted to achieve. The first one was, are we doing the right thing, and what can we do better? We're a learning organisation, so we will continually iterate and we'll continually improve our cyber and information security posture to make sure we're delivering the best service and the best assurance to our customers. And I suppose the byproduct of doing that for ourselves and making sure that we're in the best position possible through that IRAP assessment process, at the end of it, when we've gone through the actual IRAP assessment and that's been finalised, we can produce, tangible information or tangible evidence to the customer that gives them that level of assurance that not only are we committed to these types of principles, these fundamentals of cybersecurity and information security, but B, that it's been independently assessed and verified by someone else that actually do know what they're talking about and have gone through that IRAP assessment process to become accredited IRAP assessors. That they've independently assessed us, and that what we're saying and what we're purporting to want to achieve or are striving to achieve has actually been assessed, and that we are achieving those standards that are required.
So IRAP, the whole program, as it stands for InfoSec Registered Assessors Program, it was designed by Australian Signals Directorate, formerly known as that, now Australian Cybersecurity Centre, ACSC, to endorse individuals from public and private sectors to provide cybersecurity assessment services to Australian government. Now, the ACSC endorses individuals, suitably qualified ICT professionals, as they put it, to provide relevant security services with an aim to secure broader industry and Australian government information, as well as the information that the systems hold. Now, endorsed IRAP assessors can assist in securing organizations' ICT networks by independently assessing their security compliance, suggesting mitigation strategies, highlighting residual risks, and they can assess up to top secret level. The cloud one is very common now, but over and above cloud, when cloud was not so much talk of the town, it also includes secure internet gateways, information systems, gatekeeper, and FedLink. So those were some of the common ones before. But in a nutshell, the assessors like us are endorsed by the ACSC under this program to go and perform assessments which are independent to the organization and provide them assurance on where they meet and where they cannot meet, and what are the mitigation strategies to bring them up to a certain level that the Australian government expects, in line with the Information Security Manual, which is again a standard provided by Australian federal government, as well as the Attorney General's Protective Security Policy Framework.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke about VeriSaaS's mission before to support those who protect us, and VeriSaaS do that by providing commercial off-the-shelf software as a service solutions that generally would not be offered as a managed service. And with that comes, like I said, a holistic responsibility to not only offer the application or the particular platform they're using, but to ensure that our governance principles, our security principles, and our policies are in line with what the government expects, what the client expects, and also in line with the Information Security Manual. I suppose going through the IRAP assessment process, when you first undertake and look at the Information Security Manual, there are so many controls there that it appears daunting. And as an independent software vendor, you look at it and you go, wow, this is going to take forever. This is going to be too hard. But I can honestly say, having been through the process end to end, it's challenging, but it's not too hard. And my advice to other software vendors is, anything that's easy isn't worth doing. And the IRAP assessment is certainly no different to that. It is not too hard. And especially when you choose a vendor, such as Privasec, for example, where you take a collaborative approach to information security and cybersecurity, and especially during an assessment process where you're taking it as a learning experience as well as an assessment experience, you benefit in two ways. So not only do you achieve that final sort of IRAP report or that final IRAP assessment that gives customers a level of assurance that you're meeting those standards, but through the actual IRAP journey, you're maturing as an organization when it comes to your cybersecurity and your information security practices. So I suppose the biggest thing that I learned was it is not a tick in the box exercise. And I think if any customers or any ISVs or software or vendors out there are looking at the IRAP process as just a commercial advantage, which obviously it is, you do get a commercial advantage out of it. You do become more competitive, but you need to look at it also with a different lens. In the sense that you have to take a degree of social responsibility here. If you're going to provide, mission critical or sensitive services to government clients, then you have to be doing the right thing. And realistically, if you're the CEO of that company or if you're the product owner of that company, you're going to look at it with a particular lens, and you're going to think you've got the most secure service possible. And realistically, you do need someone independent to come in and have that critical and objective view of your posture and your product, to make sure that you truly are, I suppose, meeting those aspirations that you're trying to achieve, which is obviously the highest standards of information and cybersecurity. So my key takeaways from the IRAP assessment process is that, let's just say, for example, you go through the gap analysis of the IRAP assessment process and you identify deficiencies. It's a good thing. You should embrace it. It is a great thing, because what you can do then is iterate, change, learn, and adapt and develop your principles and policies. It's a learning experience. It's only going to make your organization stronger. And at the end of the day, it's only going to make your value proposition stronger as well when you go through that rigorous process. So there's really two key fundamental things to the IRAP assessment. One, it gives peace of mind to the end users, but it should also give you a bit of peace of mind for your own company as well, in the sense that what you think you believe you're doing right, you're either going to be proven right that you are doing it right, or you're going to be told you need to improve in different areas. And VeriSaaS were told they need to improve in areas. And that was really important that we went through that, that stage one gap analysis where there were deficiencies that we needed to overcome. Now, it's not a criticism of your organization. It's not designed to attack your organization or say that you're not doing the right thing. It's areas of improvement that you are then given the opportunity to iterate on and get better and continually get better. And even when you go through that second stage of IRAP and you've gone through the full assessment and you may be deemed, suitable to be handling protected workloads, you should still be continually iterating to make sure that your cyber and information security posture is strong. So it doesn't finish at the IRAP assessment. It isn't a tick in the box.
Yeah, so as the market has grown, there's a lot of significance on IRAP assessments, and we see that more and more in the industry these days. The main reason being, so there's a bit of shift in the government sector as well, where now there is a cloud-first strategy with everything that government does. Everything has to be assessed, assured up to a certain level, and what better program when it comes to Australian government services than IRAP assessment. So as I mentioned about the IRAP assessor and how that program works. So the assessors who are part of this program are endorsed by ACAC, and there is a level of scrutiny, if I can put it that way, that the assessors have to go through even to be IRAP assessors. Now that alone tells you that there is a certain standards that we as assessors need to meet as well. Now, when it comes to the significance, as you asked, what is the significance of being IRAP as an organization? So any entity can engage IRAP assessor, not only for Australian government services, but for anything. But the good thing about IRAP assessment is that when an organization goes through that, it gives the consumer, so in this case, an agency consuming cloud services, for example, or it can be an agency itself who has gone through that assessment, gives them an assurance that they have followed the standard to the Australian government's requirements, and the policies, procedures, and technology controls are implemented to that level. But there is also some sort of misconception in the market where they think IRAP assessment is too hard or complying to ISM standard is too difficult. Yes and no. The standard is written for a certain reason, and the reason being the security framework or the cybersecurity controls are implemented to the expectation of Australian government. So in that sense, yes, it's to the power of what the requirements are, but it's not impossible to implement ISM controls. It's possible, but it needs some work, and it needs some guidance and all that. That's why engaging an IRAP assessor is important, because they can tell you actually what you want, how you should be doing it, and how you can best present the report to the agency or to the consumer of your services to tell them what standards you have met. So typically, an IRAP assessor, when you engage them, they will learn and understand your system's architecture. Then they'll ensure that the required physical certifications, if it applies, has been attained. So there is a requirement for that as well. And the next step is ensure that the assessed security controls are implemented and operating effectively. That's like any auditing standard or compliance requirements. Those are the primary aspects, I guess, when it comes to the control implementation. Then the assessor would look at your scope, to look at your applicable controls and tell you whether the proposed mitigation strategy are good enough and whether they're effective. If they're not, then they will guide you accordingly with their recommendation as to what's the best possible way to go ahead to make sure that the agency is happy with the risk profile. Once that is done, they enable the reviewer of the report to make an informed decision, or informed risk-based decision, I should say, about the system suitability for the security needs and the risk appetite. So in this case, it will be agency who's looking at the report and saying, okay, I'm happy with the way report is presented. By the way, these are the residual risks, whether they are good enough for me. If they're good, yes, I'm authorizing you to onboard the services. So that's the kind of process you go through. The good thing for an organization, so in this case, taking VeriSaaS as an example, so when an agency looks at VeriSaaS report, they already know that VeriSaaS has crossed that hurdle of implementing these security controls, not only from a technology point of view, but also from policy and process point of view, up to the Australian government requirements. And they have taken a third-party assurance, which is an independent IRAP assessor, to provide that assurance and deliver that report. And the risks are presented not by VeriSaaS themselves, they are verified by VeriSaaS, but they are written by an independent assessor informing the agency that this is what the risk profile looks like, and then the agency can make an informed decision. So more and more we see these requirements, IRAP assessment requirements, coming through the tenders as well, where this has become a prerequisite before even agency onboards any cloud services, for example. Not only cloud, but any services for that matter. But it's more and more becoming a norm, which is now very enforceable across all the service providers, mainly the cloud providers.
I'm a fundamental believer that, as an individual, you should never be the smartest person in the room. You should always surround yourself with people that are smarter than you in various different areas. And I think by engaging, subject matter experts like Prashant from Privasec or, other organizations that are experts in the field and what they're good at, you can only benefit from, gaining their knowledge, embracing their critical review of what you're doing. And it's going to make you a better organization. Personally, I learned a lot. My company was better off for the IRAP assessment process, but I was also better off as well. I learned a lot through it. I knew where our deficiencies were. I wouldn't have seen that before if I didn't have that independent lens over our processes and policies. And that critical review made us better. I learned from it. But that comes back to that collaborative approach that, I can't speak on behalf of other IRAP assessors. I'm strictly speaking about Privasec here, but there was a really strong collaborative approach where there was effectively, we were all aiming to achieve the same thing. So Privasec wanted to see us be successful, but in saying that, they're not going to cut corners just to give us an IRAP assessment report. it was truly about doing the right thing. And so when there was criticisms of our policies or there was deficiencies that we needed to overcome, it wasn't simply an email saying, hey, you need to fix this. It was a collaborative approach where we learned from each other, and learning from subject matter experts like Prashant and the other IRAP assessors that were involved. We developed as a company. I developed as a CISO. I developed as a leader in the organization, and even having finalized the IRAP assessment now, I carry those learnings through my day-to-day operations when it comes to information and cybersecurity practices. And it has been touched on, sort of during this interview. There is obviously a commercial advantage to the IRAP process. When you are selling to government, they need to ensure that they're complying with the Information Security Manual. They need to ensure that they're adopting technology that is safe and secure, because often the information they're putting on it is highly sensitive. It could be person's private information. It could be highly protected information about investigations. They need to know that what they're adopting is in line with their own cybersecurity information policies and procedures. And having an IRAP report that says that you've been independently verified or independently assessed, and that you are an organisation that is striving to achieve the highest standards of information and cybersecurity, it not only removes barriers to adoption. So when you're going through that sales process or that sales life cycle with government, it removes that barrier, because they are going to question your ability to secure workloads, and they are going to question your cybersecurity and information security practices. But when you can not only answer those questions yourself and say, yes, we are committed to this and this is how we do it, but you can also provide an independent report, from a company that specializes in it, that is not part of your organization, that have no commercial benefit in lying or trying to, I suppose, shed a positive light over something that may not be so positive. It's very, very powerful. And so not only does it remove barriers, it also gives you a competitive advantage over the next vendor who doesn't take it so seriously. And it's disappointing to see that some vendors don't take their information and cybersecurity policy, practices seriously. They're in it to make money, and let's face it, everybody in private sector is in it to make money. But there's a really fine balance between, making money and selling to government, especially when they do have a mission critical role. Private sector has just as much responsibility to do the right thing with regards to, private, sensitive, highly protected information as the government does. And the more barriers that we can remove for the government, and take that burden away from them, again, I said at the start, the more time that they can spend actually doing their critical functions like protecting the community. So my biggest takeaway from the IRAP process is it's not just all about getting the document at the end saying, yep, looks good, but it's the learning experience and that ongoing iteration and that really critical view from someone else saying, hey, you can improve here, and then improving on it. And to be honest with you, it helps me sleep better at night. So, whether I have a piece of paper saying we've been assessed or not, I know that our practices and our cybersecurity policies and our information security policies are good, which means when I turn around to a government agency and say, hey, yes, we can protect your sensitive and protected workload, I sleep at night knowing that that's been actually assessed by someone else. And it's not just my opinion. And so the key takeaway, my message to anybody else is the IRAP assessment process isn't too hard. And if that's the mentality that you have, you really need to assess what you're trying to offer government. It is a learning experience. It is a development experience. And you should be taking it on, on face value for what it is that you should be trying to achieve the highest standard of information security and cybersecurity practices for your customers, but also for yourselves. The byproduct of that is the assessment report you get at the end.
Sure, no. Thanks for that. Look, with any cybersecurity standard, the technical people, the architects, so on and so forth, can go and implement the controls, but if the senior management is not on board, nothing is going to happen. That's not only with IRAP, but with anything in cybersecurity. Senior management support has to be on board fully. So when we started with VeriSaaS, obviously VeriSaaS was fairly new into this. The product itself was also in its initial stages where they were going to implement controls and so on and so forth. They took the IRAP journey full steam when they started this journey. I remember when we started, there were there were a lot of discussions on how we get this right, how do we do the right thing, how we implement these controls, what's the best way to do it. And the approach right from the get-go, from the senior management of VeriSaaS, was not how can we get this done quickly. The approach is always how can we do this properly and make sure that we have the framework in place so we can not only implement controls now as a point in time exercise, but also have an ongoing continual improvement process. So they were very supportive to take on board whatever they can as part of the control applicability, but there were a lot of things that had to be taken on board, not only from a technology control point of view, but also looking at the documentation, writing new documents, procedures, policies, and etc., that are not only required by the standard, but just as a best practice, they had to get this done sooner than later. So to answer your question, yes, the VeriSaaS management, particularly Brice, who I was dealing with as a main point of contact, was really receptive to hear more. And the response always was, yes, we can do that, but what else we can do to make it better next year? So I guess adding to what Brice has said, the journey has been good so far. Even after the assessment, there has been questions about how we can improve this, how we can improve that. So that's quite welcoming, to be honest, as an IRAP assessor, because you deal with some organizations where they just want to get it done and dusted and deal with it next year. But when you go to next year, you have more problems to fix. VeriSaaS attitude has been always, we want to do this now, but we also want to make sure that we come out very mature when we come for the assessment next time. So I guess from an experience point of view, given the size of the organization of VeriSaaS and the experience we had and the amount of receptiveness we see to onboard the requirements of the standard is quite welcoming. And I'm very sure that VeriSaaS is going to come up with new features, services, products, and so on and so forth in this new product based on what they see in the industry that they operate in. And whatever they're going to do, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be at the highest level required by the Australian government. So to answer your question, Shamin, yes, it has been a very pleasant journey. And to see that the management is doing all the right things when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, I suppose the last thing I want to say in relation to the IRAP process is that is to look at it selflessly. One of the things that was just discussed about before, and Prashant raised it about, there's a misconception that it is too hard. And some people may not want to embark on the journey, but at the end of the day, I've touched on this. I mean, whether you're a government sector or a private sector or a vendor or a government agency, we have an equal responsibility to make sure that, information security and cybersecurity are paramount within, government or private sector workloads, whatever it might be. There is a community, there needs to be a sense of community when it comes to doing the right thing. So my final thoughts around the IRAP assessment process: don't do it for yourself. Yes, you do learn a lot, you benefit a lot as an organization having gone through the IRAP assessment, but do it for your customers. That's my main message. My last message is do it for your customers, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that you wanted to support, you wanted to provide value to them, and you're wanting to provide a great product and a service for them. So when you embark on, any sort of assessment process, or when you embark on any sort of, testing, whether it be penetration testing or load testing or an IRAP assessment or ISO assessment or whatever it might be, try and put a lens on it that you're doing it for the customer and not yourself. And it becomes a lot easier because, we all need to do the right thing. We might not be government agencies. We might not have the same, rigorous standards, upon us in the private sector that the government need to meet. But if we can take some of that, just even a small percentage of that burden away from the government agency by just simply doing the right thing, then we're truly actually contributing to the community. And I'm a big fundamental believer in that the private sector have a significant role to play in supporting the community. So if we can support government agencies police forces, regulatory environments, whoever it might be, if we can take a little bit of that burden away from them just by simply doing the right thing, then you're doing a good job. And doesn't mean you can't make money. It doesn't mean you can't progress, your commercial aspirations. That's fine. But embarking on the IRAP assessment journey, it is not too hard because you're doing it for the right reason. Do it for the customer if you're not going to do it for yourself.